In today's video, we are taking a look at a wild hand from the Cash Game World Championship that took place recently on CoinPoker. They are playing 50, 100, $16,000 deep, 160 big blinds. In this hand, we are featuring Enlight, who is a good, strong, long-time cash game crusher, and JSchusteritsch, who is also a long-time cash game crusher. Two of the best. It folds around to Enlight in the cutoff with ace, jack of diamonds. This is a very easy raise. He makes it 250 bucks. Jay calls on the button. The blinds fold. We see a flop, heads up. It's pretty good for Enlight. It comes king, queen, 10, two diamonds. Enlight has a royal flush draw and a straight already. This is a spot where a lot of people would automatically bet, thinking, I want to get money in the pot. We're playing super deep stacked. And while that is true, this is actually a situation where you should check a large amount of the time with your entire range. And the reason for that is because when you raise the cutoff and the button calls, the button should have a whole lot of hands that connect well with high card flops, like king, queen, 10, which is going to result in the player on the button betting a decent amount of the time. Now, if you know your opponent's on the passive side, like say you expect them to check back a whole lot of hands with a king or queen or a 10, a one pair hand, for example, well, then maybe you just want to start betting. And to be fair, when you are playing very deep stacked in general from out of position, you are going to want to use mixed frequencies with almost all of your range. But when you are checking a large amount of the time, you need to make a point to check with some hands that you know are never folding, like this one. And you also want to make a point to check with some hands that can potentially check raise. I have to imagine the plan here is probably just to check call the flop, but check raise is probably on the table as well. Enlight goes for the check. Jay does not fall for the trap. They check it back, and the turn is the queen of diamonds. Enlight now has a royal flush. They're going to win the pot. Now, again, a lot of people think I should bet and try to get money in the pot. The problem, though, is that if you bet the turn for what, 600 even, and get called, and on the river you overbet it for like 3,800, you're nowhere near all in. That is a big problem. When you are playing very deep stacked, the goal is to get a ton of money in the pot. The problem here, though, is that you can't realistically make too many overbets on the turn and or river with your range, because Jay on the button is going to be sitting here with some full houses and some queens, right? And you don't want to be betting big into that range in general. So this is a spot where when Enlight checks the flop and Jay checks behind, Jay's going to have a lot of hands containing some showdown value. What is showdown value on king, queen, 10? Well, it's going to be a lot of hands containing a queen or a king or a 10, but mainly a queen or a 10. This is a spot where I have to presume Jay's going to bluff the flop some chunk of the time with random gut shots. Under pairs might even bluff the flop. So when Jay does check it back, the most likely hand they have is probably a queen, right? If you had to really try to narrow it down. Maybe ace high. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? They probably have something. So if Jay has a queen on the turn, they're always going to bet, right? If they happen to have a flush, they're always going to bet. If they somehow have a straight or a full house especially, they're going to bet. So this is an excellent spot to, again, check with the royal flush. So let's see what Enlight does. By the way, if positions were swapped, Enlight would definitely be betting. You can't check behind with a royal flush, but when you are first to act, checking is quite nice. So Enlight checks, and now Jay goes for the $487 bet, about 3/4 pot. So what do we do with the ace, jack of diamonds now? I think both check calling and check raising are fine options. It is good for Enlight to see Jay using a chunky bet size, which to some extent represents a relatively polarized range, meaning they either have a very good made hand or nothing. If they have nothing, well, raising doesn't do you any good because they're going to fold. And if they have a very good made hand, you'll probably be able to get a lot of money in the pot on the river anyway. However, this is a situation where Enlight has to consider how do they want to play decently large chunks of their range in general. And I think a lot of Enlight's range is going to want to just check and call. Because if Enlight has a king or a 10 or the ace of diamonds or even the jack of diamonds, this is a spot where I think check call is very nice because these hands are okay and you don't really want to raise and then get called or re-raised with any of those. So when most of your range really, really, really does not want to check raise, which is usually going to be the case when you check the flop and the turn, you should call the majority of your range. I know it's tempting to put in the raise right here, right now, but I think calling is probably ideal. One really nice thing about calling with hands like this is that it will result, on average, in your opponent not being able to bet the river quite so often, because your opponent has to worry about you having random super nut hands in your range, which is a really good thing. With your medium strength hands, like a king in this spot, you really, really, really just want to see a cheap showdown. And a way to do that is by protecting your range by including some really good made hands like full houses and four of a kind and royal flushes. Anyway, Enlight calls, and the river is the 5 of diamonds, putting up 4 diamonds. This is a spot where I presumed Enlight would just check and then put in the check raise. But Enlight has other plans. The pot contains 1,625. Enlight is going to bet with a small amount, $406, 25% pot. You may say, why in the world would they do that? Well, this is a spot where a good flush is definitely good enough to value bet, like a jack of diamonds, maybe even a 9 of diamonds. These are hands that can go for a small lead because Jay probably isn't going to bet the turn a whole lot with a hand containing a 9 of diamonds or jack of diamonds in general. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but Enlight certainly has a lot of those in his range, mainly with king, jack, jack 10, etc. Right? Maybe pocket jacks, right? These are all hands that can contain the jack of diamonds, and I have to presume the jack of diamonds is good enough for 25% pot in this scenario. When you're playing against good, strong, aggressive players who will view this small bet as mostly jack of diamonds, you can to some extent account on them putting in a raise because they realize when they check the flop and then bet big on the turn, they're going to have some full houses in their range, and they're going to have some ace of diamonds in their range. And that crushes the jack of diamonds, right? Now, I realize that Jay can't have the ace of diamonds because Enlight has it, but good, strong, aggressive players won't care. They will take logical bluffing hands and bluff with them. So, this 406 bet, if it will induce a raise from either value hands or bluffs, is way better than checking, because if you check, Jay's going to bet maybe, if they even decide to go for an overbet, let's say 2,500, which is quite a big bet. Usually they're going to bet more like 800 or 1,600. But if they do go for the overbet, you put in the raise, sure, you get to play a big pot. But by betting 400, now if Jay does decide to raise, which a lot of good, strong, aggressive players will do in this spot, because like I said, Enlight looks like they have a whole lot of jack of diamonds or 9 of diamonds, whereas Jay could have the ace of diamonds or full houses. This is a spot where you will get raised very, very frequently. And now if you bet 400 and get raised, now the raise is going to be to 3,500 or 5,000, right? Because essentially, Jay will be trying to represent a polarized range of either the nuts or nothing, and let's be fair, in this spot, it's kind of hard to have nothing. So this is a spot where I think Jay is going to raise a large chunk of the time, and this 400 bet will make the pot way bigger. Jay does go for the $4,000 raise, which, whether they have value or bluff, is far bigger than if Enlight instead opted to check. Now, what should Enlight do? Should they min raise? Should they go all in? What do you think? Take a second. Think about it. Let me know in the comment section down below. How would you play the royal flush if you got to this point? While you're down there, click the like and subscribe button for me, please. I think there's only one option here, and that is to go all in. And the reason is because if Jay has a full house and you re-raise minimum, you may just get called because they would have to worry about the slightly better full houses if there are any in their range, because, pocket kings is not likely for Jay, so they probably have a hand like queen 10 or king queen. But more importantly, they have to worry about the royal flush. You may say, royal flush isn't that likely. No, it's not. But when the hand plays out like this, where you bet small on the river, get raise, and then rip it all in, it's actually quite likely. Also, they could have a straight flush with jack 9 of diamonds. That's another hand that would make a whole lot of sense to play this way. So there are 2 combinations of super nuts that Enlight very easily could have. Also, perhaps pocket queens. I realize Jay may block a queen, but pocket queens is a hand that could also play in this manner. Same thing with pocket kings, right? So there actually are a large amount of really, really, really good hands that Enlight may play in this manner. I made a video a long time ago about should someone fold 4 of a kind. Mr. Editor, put it up. That's the scenario where when it goes like bet, raise, re-raise, re-raise, re-raise on the river, I mean, unless your opponent's running some insane bluff with the blocker, like the Jack of Diamonds or the Ace of Diamonds, they're going to show you the nuts. And I think most people in this spot, when they bet 406 and get raised to 4,000, if they're sitting there with the Ace of Diamonds, they're not going to bluff raise it all in. They're going to simply call. If they have the Jack of Diamonds, they're not going to bluff raise it all in. They're either going to call or they're going to fold, right? So this is a spot where when you get jammed, you have to be very, very cautious. But at least as played this way, Enlight made the pot $1,500-ish bigger. Maybe a whole lot more if Jay would have used a smaller bet like 1,600. You don't want to min raise though, because if your opponent has a premium hand, they're going to call any amount. Like if they have a full house, they're just going to call, I got to presume. And if they have a weaker hand, they're going to fold no matter the raise size in this scenario. Because you were saying I have the super nuts or nothing. And if that's the case, you might as well just make the pot bigger when your opponent's sitting here with a full house. Jay's giving it some thought, finds the fold, Enlight wins the pot. And in this situation, Enlight won more money than I would have, because I would have gone for the river check raise, and I would have missed out on $1,500 or $2,000 worth of value that Enlight captured, which shows why he is one of the best poker players in the world. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, again, click the like and subscribe button down below. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And I'll talk to you next time.